So one of the things I want to start by just getting a feel for you guys, which is who currently is part of a startup? Great, so only a couple. So who wants to be part of a startup or is in this class to learn what it takes to get their idea off the ground? So maybe a quarter of the class after that, maybe a little bit more. And who's just here because it's one of the easy credits and you want to learn about this thing called entrepreneurship? The rest of us. Or you're in the wrong room and it's cool if you get up and leave now, I won't be offended. So, okay, so that's helpful. And so who's heard of Paul Alstrom or venture capital? Who knows what a venture capitalist is? A couple people? And Paul Alstrom's a local one here we've got, and he came up with this book, this process called Nail It and Scale It. Who's heard of that? Or used it maybe even, okay. What about Steve Blank? Now this one in Utah isn't as well known, but who knows what a business model canvas is or who Steve Blank is? Less people, okay, that's good. That helps. So let me ask you a question before we start too. So what is an entrepreneur? Have you guys already had this conversation? Like, who's got a good definition for what it means to be an entrepreneur?
Problem solver for money. Find a problem, come up with a solution, market it, sell it, do it again. Do it again, do it again, do it again.
Stop there. That's one of the better ones I've heard. Anybody else? Usually it has something to do with, go ahead.
Creating revenue yourself, being your own boss.
Yeah, that's a good interpretation too. For sure. And a lot of people, so most people when I ask that question, the first thing they say is, well, it's about coming up with an idea and starting a business, right? So it's like business. I can work for myself and I can make some money. So again, for me, like none of these are all the right answers for sure. But for me, entrepreneurship is a little bit more and a little bit different than that. Entrepreneurship for me is creating something, right? It's like taking the world as we know it and making something that exists that doesn't currently exist. It's like a declaration. So, you know, Steve Zaffron, he's got this model about what it means to make a declaration. It's like using language to declare something and make that thing that exist using our language and then going from there. So I find entrepreneurship to be very similar, which is if it were going to be done already, somebody else is already doing it likely. So there's two models in entrepreneurship, which is innovative, which is this area over here, which means nobody's doing it, and replicative. So I don't usually talk about replicative businesses because it's like copy paste, like take something somebody else is doing and do it in a new market. So to your example, like you can create new things and do it over and over again and make money, or you can do something that somebody else is doing and do it in a different place or in a different way and then do it over and over again and make money. Well, it's totally cool. Like that's what entrepreneurship can be for sure. But either way, you need to, as a person, need to make something exist that didn't previously exist. So it's a very creative function in the way that I work and the way we work with people. Because without it, it's really tough. Entrepreneurship can be super lonely. One of the reasons sustainable startups exist is because besides coffee shops, and in Salt Lake specifically, there weren't places for people to go, especially outside of the university. And once you finish the university or before you get in, it's like, where do you show up? It's like Starbucks, you know, Salt Lake roasting companies right next to us. Like we used to show up there a lot. One of my mentors and previous professors, Rob Walker, bless you, he created something called the Foundry. So for every 12 weeks, people like us could show up and build cool things. But then outside the 12 weeks and the thing was over, it was like we kind of all went back to our places and did stuff. So besides being very creative and trying to put things together, and entrepreneurship being lonely, it's about adding value. And a lot of ways that we talk about it is something called a social agreement. So money is definitely one of those things. It's a social agreement. So money doesn't exist in like a physics, like a tangible sense, right? There's the physical world and the social world. So one of the things that's important from my perspective to understand about entrepreneurship, is it good if I move around or bad for you since I've got cameras?
Either way is fine.
All right. So something exists that hasn't previously existed is a challenge, but like the reason for things to exist is important from a social sense, because it's what makes us different, us humans different than everybody else and everything else on the planet. But we have to get clear. I just read who's read the book Gilgamesh? Has anybody read that book before? One person. It's a good read. It talks a lot about, it's supposedly the world's oldest story before the Bible. So if you're interested in reading it, read it. It's got a lot of parallels to entrepreneurship and trying to find meaning and value. So in the physical world, like physics, like if I drop stuff, like gravity says, like it drops, right? So we're not, as entrepreneurs, trying to change that world by any means, right? That's a big thing to overcome. Once you talk to Elon Musk, he's still not trying to change it, he's just trying to use it. So if we can step ourselves outside of the physical world, we can talk about social agreements. And usually that sounds like something like this. The world is one way, and I perceive it to be that way because somebody else before me, smarter than me, wiser than me, told me that's the way it should be. So money is a good example. Was that thing here when you showed up? Yeah, it was. And is it changing, and does it affect the world that we live in today? Yeah, it does. So, that's the same thing with the clothes we wear, or the reasons we go to college, or have kids, or all these things that we talk about are social agreements. And for me, entrepreneurship really is about understanding social agreements and being able to look at them differently, apply it to adding value in the world. And currently, one of those ways is money. So, this is what we do with our startups day in and day out. People come in and they say, hey, I've got this killer idea. We should make this app. I just need $1 million and we're good to go. And what Sustainable Startups does, and what I do as an entrepreneur, is we help teach people that having an idea isn't enough. Everybody needs money. And trying to understand that from the get-go is important. And one of the things they asked me to talk about today is how Sustainable Startups, lost one. How Sustainable Startups helps people, and specifically students. I think that was one. So I mean, we do normal things like we provide co-working spaces for people. We do educational programs. We do consulting services, usually for free. We connect people. Like some people have ideas that need to be patented. I argue most times that you don't. But if they do, and sometimes they do, we connect people and usually help them get their stuff patented. So we provide services like that. We also we run programs. We won Sustainable Startups back-to-back years, won this program called the Growth Accelerator grant from the SBA. So the National SBA office gives money to people to help companies accelerate. And what we do, not many people have win it, and not many people win it 2 years in a row. And what we do that's different is that we go after underserved people. So usually when I tell people like, I help get companies started, we provide space, we run an incubator program, which is different than an accelerator program we'll talk about in a minute. But what we do differently is that we don't take equity. People say, accelerators, so like that's like boom startup. Hopefully some of you guys have heard of that. That's Utah's. It's been pretty well known. Techstars out of Colorado, right? Boulder is a pretty cool startup-y place. And the most famous is Y Combinator. And so they're like, so it's like that, right? Like you guys help accelerate companies, right? And the answer is sort of. Because those guys, what they do is they stick you in this big program, and they give you some money in trade for some equity, which means you get them part of your company, so that if they make money, that if you make money, they make money. So it's a great thing, but it's not what we do. So that's maybe one of the reasons that we want some money. What we do is we go after underserved entrepreneurs. We go after women. Everybody wants to talk about tech these days, but we don't mind tech. We just don't focus on tech. So we do stuff like youth programs, right? So I run one of the bigger youth programs in the state. We go to the underserved side. On the west side of Salt Lake, the dropout rate for some of these high school students is over 50%. So one of the things we do is we help those kids understand that entrepreneurship is a way for them to create opportunity for themselves. They don't have to take the normal route, and likely they're not because they're dropping out of school anyway. So how do we look at the world differently? How do we challenge some of these social agreements so that they can look at the world differently? So it's one of my favorite programs, the youth program that we do. We also do nonprofits. Nonprofits, you know, the social agreement around nonprofits is that people say, oh, I'm a nonprofit, I don't have to generate revenue, I don't have to make money, right? Like people give me stuff and like, I apply for grants and like, that's what makes this thing work. And we say, we get that and we're open to that working for you, but for most nonprofits, my nonprofit's one of them, that's not a viable option for most people. And we treat nonprofits like we do any other company, which is, we treat them like a startup. So nonprofits, youth, women, clean tech. You know, clean, my background is energy and I love clean tech, but clean is a dirty word in Utah. But so I drove down today and looking like couldn't see, you know, 100 miles in front of me. It was just like, with kids of my own and looking at the future and talking to the kids, like looking at the world differently and looking at ways we can live within our means and solve some of the bigger problems is something that I care about deeply, and it's one of the reasons I started. And so we help those people in Utah because, again, like they feel pretty alienated. One of the clean tech companies that we were working alongside just came up with like a miniaturized air quality monitor. It's like, that's pretty cool. So we focused on the underserved, and we focus really early stage stuff. Early stage meaning sometimes they have a customer, sometimes it's just an idea. It's what we call problem solution fit. So most people jump right to, so there's two parts of validation, and an accelerator, the one that I talked about with Boom Startup, is usually based around this idea of like, you already found a problem, you already found a solution, and you are just trying to find traction. You're trying to get out and find customers and get up this hockey stick. Does everybody know the hockey stick curve that venture capitalists want you to try and get after? So most people are trying to validate their concept and get up that curve during an accelerator. And that's why they talk about it as an accelerator. So the long and short of it, like this is what Sustainable Startups is we do things differently, which is instead of worrying about the long-term stuff and trying to help people scale businesses, like we focus on people that are doing interesting things and trying to create value. We focus less on money and we look more at value. That's what we do. And that comes from kids, it comes from all sorts of places. Because the people that receive venture funding to start a company, I saw, you know, a couple of you guys raise your hands. Who's looking for money to fund their company? About the same number of people that raised their hands saying they're in a startup, which is totally acceptable. But the hard part is like the reality, like I'm raising an impact fund right now. And to fit the model, like it's just a very, very small percentage. In fact, the SBA is a big sponsor and partner of ours, and 99.1% of new companies that are formed every year don't receive any funding whatsoever. And like 0.8% of that comes from the SBA in the forms of loans and other things. And like a very like a 0.00 like 25% comes from the rest of the investing world, the startup angels, venture capitalists, crowdfunding. Like that's a very small percentage. So one of the challenges is people walk in every day and they say, hey, I need $1 million. I've got this great idea. And it's like, me too. But that's likely not going to happen. So let's talk about how we get you there without money. So we spend a lot of time helping people figure out their model and looking at problem solution fit so that it's worth trying to figure out the other things. If you don't have problem solution fit, then why look at product market fit? So I'm going to write those up so I don't forget. But so we run an incubator every, I don't know, 3 times a year. And one of our metrics is how are we winning is based on the number of companies that we convince people they should kill. So people come in with ideas, some people come in with customers, and we run them through a program, and we try to find ways to get people to kill their ideas. In fact, we throw a party every time somebody kills an idea and says, hey, like maybe they found problem solution fit, but if they find the fit, they say, it's not actually creating enough value for us.
it's not worth time putting energy into. It's not making the world a better place. It's just, can I, like coffee shop, like one guy made a coffee shop, right? And he did all the stuff and he got it up and going and it was profitable. And then he realized he didn't want to run a coffee shop. I was like, great. So he killed the idea and moved on to something more important. And he started focusing on, what did he move on to? Providing jobs and creating sandals for refugees in Ethiopia. So he, during his efforts, he traveled and found that there was actually a bigger need. Like, yeah, he could run a coffee shop and people could get their coffee, which was cool. But he ended up traveling and he found that Ethiopia's got a massive problem with kids, that they all go to orphanages, and at 18, they all got thrown out, but with no job skills, no ability to provide. And so him and his wife started, they were making rope sandals along their way and selling them. And he realized that he could help provide jobs for these people and then sell them and create an economy for those people. So he went from coffee shop to quarter rope sandals. Not because the one idea didn't make money, but because he thought it created more value to do it that way. So they also asked me to talk about a couple startups, right? And what makes a good idea a good idea. So let me talk about a couple startups, and then I'll talk about what makes a good idea a good idea. I made a list of some of the cooler ones we have that we've worked with. One is Truffle Creative. This company, he's been around for a long time. His name's Cassidy, and he came to us actually with his girlfriend at the time, and he was an entrepreneur. He just didn't know it, and he was just kind of tagging along. We give out free food and stuff, and he hadn't gone to college. He'd barely graduated high school. How you know he's an entrepreneur is he found some sort of mechanism to compensate without money to somebody to help him get his writing done that he needed to pass his classes. And I was like, I don't get what you're saying, but I know you're an entrepreneur because you worked within the framework to make something happen that everybody else said was important. But Cassidy and his girlfriend started this company called Truffle Creative, and they make signs and stickers. Actually, my laptop's got a bunch of his stickers on it. And he built a really cool, scalable, like, sign company. And the cool part about it is he's like, well, I don't get it. Like, I'm not sustainable. Like, in fact, I print a bunch of stuff and waste a bunch of stuff. I said, I know, but that's cool. Because actually, working with us, we have more impact on the people that don't consider themselves sustainable, because it means there's more room for improvement. So besides helping Cassidy understand his product and what people wanted, we also helped him understand that, you know, instead of just throwing his stuff away, he could reuse it. So not only did he reuse it, so he took some of the scraps that he couldn't do anything with, and he gave them away to a local art collective. And the students that came to that thing made stuff out of it. And the stuff he could do, he started making wallets out of some of the material and selling those for more revenue. In fact, he was making more money on the wallets at one point than he was on the signs. And then he started moving over to, as he had money, to more sustainable resources, different inks and different types of vinyl and products to be his whole supply chain more sustainable. So he came in not knowing he was an entrepreneur. He came in not thinking that he could be sustainable. And we helped show him that, one, he was an entrepreneur, and two, he didn't have to be sustainable, that could just be part of his business model and make more money, which it did. And then at the end of the day, he's currently in New Zealand. His mission now is to actually bike the world and help entrepreneurs on their journey and share it through a blog and through sponsors and different things. So he's decided that his mission, although he's still, you know, Tim Ferriss, who's read the 4-Hour Work Week. I think he got a little inspired from that, but he's picked up what Tim Ferriss says is like, you can do your work from anywhere. You just have to have the right network of people and communications to make it all happen in today's day and age. That's the short version. And so Cassidy picked all the stuff up and decided, I'm going to travel the world and still sell signs and stuff, but I'm going to go pursue a personal mission and try and meet people and experience life a little bit differently. So again, like, Cassidy, for me, learned what it means to be an entrepreneur. And then he looked at himself and said, I'm working all the time, but I'm making good money. is this enough? And the answer is no, so he scaled back some stuff to travel and do the things he wanted and still make enough money to get by. We call that a lifestyle company, which is great. Like, that's different than the growth hockey stick company that the accelerators work with. But again, like for us, we don't actually care. What matters to us is the person. So we talk about growing entrepreneurs at sustainable startups. And I imagine that's what most of you guys are doing here today, is trying to figure out what it means to be an entrepreneur and if you want to be one. Or maybe you want to be a venture capitalist, or maybe you want to work for Proofpoint or Adobe or Qualtrics or HireVue. You know, I know a bunch of these guys, and Josh James, like, he's a great entrepreneur, right? Like, I really respect Josh James, and they do some really interesting things. So if you want to be a unicorn, like, that's great. But know that being a unicorn is like these come out of nowhere billion-dollar business valuations plus from startup companies. And Utah's, surprisingly, has quite a few, and a lot of them come from, you know, this section right here, which is pretty awesome. So, like, why I brought up Gilgamesh earlier is because Gilgamesh is all about a hero's journey, and entrepreneurship, in a lot of ways, is a hero's journey. So, my recommendation, and the thing that I do the most with people, is help them figure out if this is the thing they want to do. We get a lot of people that come and say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but as soon as they figure it out, what that means, like staying up late and working a lot of hours and doing certain things and trying to follow the path that works for different people, they realize that's not something they want to do. And the ones that do, they do it really well. So it's better for everybody from our perspective that we figure that out sooner than later, because if you figure out you don't want to do it, then like Cassidy, you have a chance to figure out what it is you want to do, right? And if you don't figure it out, then you're going to prolong that and maybe waste a bunch of time and energy and end up in the same place anywhere or being unhappy about it. So either way, it's a good thing for you to figure out sooner than later. So if nothing else, if all this is turning into, I don't know what that guy said today, remember, just figure out, like, for yourself if this is something you really want to do. And if it's for the money, or if it's because you're trying to create something that doesn't exist. So it takes the drive and the creativity and the passion to create something that doesn't exist, because everything else that comes in your way, like no matter how many 140-page books from smart people that you read and networks that you have, it's likely not enough to overcome the loneliness and the struggles and the things that it takes to do those things. And if you're not trying to do those things, you're just trying to make a lifestyle business that works, or a replicative one that makes some decent money, and you find out what's important to you, whether it's your family or your faith or you know, your finances, like whatever it is, like just be clear about it and be okay with it. Like, it doesn't matter to me, right? Like, I don't care. But it should matter to you, right? Okay. So some of the companies we work with and people we help. So one of the great ones we do is, like, it's a very sustainable type one, right? It's the Green Urban Lunchbox. They build farming programs. They do fruit shares. They do all sorts of things, education. They're trying to bring back sustainable food to kind of local economies, right? And they work out of our space. They do all sorts of cool stuff. Base camper vans. This girl's got this vision that Utah is a great place to come to, and rock climbers and skiers and snowboarders and people doing extreme sports need to rent vans that are full of equipment that they can go do cool stuff with. So she started that company. She's in our current cohort and trying to figure it out. She didn't realize at first, like, those type of people also trash vans and, like, treat equipment really hard. So people are really stoked, and she's booked all the time, but at the same time, like, she's learning what it means to depreciate assets and all of that stuff. Nut Butter is a guy that's used to be the gourmet head chef for Harmon's, is making, again, sustainable food options. Less in the sustainable route, Beacon. Beacon's a private airline, kind of a membership model. They just took $5 million in venture and are headed out to New York to start a New York to Boston route. They came and worked with us for a while, and they've taken the most money from anybody that we've worked with to do this thing. And again, like, we advise everybody to not take money, except for the people that need it. And airplanes and building something like that, their model definitely needed money. So for them, it made a lot of sense. And again, they positioned themselves in a way, a lot of the venture capital market is built to work for the market and not for the entrepreneur. So usually, I know somebody that built a $100 million business and they only walked away with $1 million. And that's not uncommon. So, but if you know that ahead of time and you do the right things, like you can protect yourself. But again, the best way to build a company and keep that value that you built for yourself is not to take money from other people. So we spend a lot of time with people trying to help them build value and keep it. And then if they need money, to point them in the right directions and get it for them. Cool Angle, a company that coats house shingles that are like directionally reflective. So apparently, like, people think when you paint your roof white, it looks really bad. And even though it saves a bunch of energy and like it's cheaper and like there's all these benefits to it, like some reason people have this social agreement that says like white roofs are like bad and we shouldn't do that thing. So these guys kind of figured that out and said, okay, what if we just paint it from the top the way the sun sees it and leave it the color that the homeowners want so that they can both save energy and it can look good. So they've got a bunch of, again, you talk about who needs patents. Those guys needed patents and they've got a bunch, and super cool company. But again, problem solution fit is there, product market fit, not exactly sure. It's a pretty tough one for them. So that's an example of a bunch of the companies that we work with. And then I promise to do one more thing, and then I'll open it up to you guys and kind of see where the conversation goes. They also asked me to talk about the stages of acceleration and what it takes to be a good idea. So I forgot, I'll jump back to the good idea. So for us, good idea is really, there's no such thing. That's the easiest way to say it, right? A good idea is for me, is something that you're passionate about and something that you care about. Because, like, I don't know about you, but I imagine, like, at least some of you are the same, where like you're in the shower in the morning or having something for breakfast and you're like, hey, I've got this idea. And sometimes it's about like how you like can do your laundry better, or like you gotta go shopping and like get some stuff, or like your homework assignment. But other times it's like, hey, that thing sucks, and if I improved it, like that would be helpful for me, and maybe I turn that into a business or this idea. And it's like, that happens for me like all the time, and I imagine it does for most people. But just because I'm sure lots of them are good ideas. I don't write most of them down. But just because it's a good idea doesn't mean I should do anything with it. A piece of advice that I got a long time ago was there was a business model around buying up URLs and then selling them, right? And some people made a lot of money on that. But the advice that I got is like the value in these things, again, a social agreement is like, what's the value of a website? Like a $9.99 URL, and I think these days you can get them for like $3 or something, and with a 2-year commitment, like they're pretty cheap, right? But some of them sell for a really large amount of money. And all that value is created somewhere, right? Like between like when you buy it from the person for really cheap and when you sell it to the person for a lot of money. And I know somebody that used to buy a whole bunch of these things and sell every once in a while. And I would say, why do you do it? And how do you know which ones are going to work and which ones aren't? He said, well, what I do is I buy things that I think I could turn into a company. In fact, some of them I do. And he made more money starting websites as businesses than selling URLs. And it was just kind of a byproduct of the things he did. But he said, look, I don't buy a URL that I don't plan to do something with. Because if I don't have the passion for it, like I can't create value. And if you can't create value, then you can't change it from the $2.99 to whatever you sell it at. So somehow you have to create value, or somebody else has to perceive value in that thing. So I'd take that URL example and apply it to my own life and try and get others to apply it to theirs, which is, look, if you're not going to start flowers.com, like if you don't love flowers, like why buy the domain? Like it might totally be needed, and it's like, something definitely worth doing, but likely not for you. You might spend a lot of time and energy building something does it solve a problem and a solution? Yeah, but where's the value come in? So the underlying thing from us is not just monetary value, but at Sustainable Startups, we talk, and what we do differently is we talk about personal value and why we look at doing impact. Impact can be anything from helping people in third world countries to helping, a company start a taco cart here because it makes their lives better and they make good tacos. Like, that's definitely not out of the realm of things we help people do. But we don't help people that are just trying to start something to claim money from somebody. So there's two ways to think about money, which is you can create value, which is you're increasing, it's like a classic negotiation technique, right? So there's this pie, and depending on who you are, you're trying to negotiate your way into a bigger slice. It's like, hey, let me cut the pie, and then you got to choose halves, right? Like, that's the classic PB&J example. It's like you try and cut it down the middle. It's like, hey, that's a fair negotiation. It's like, I'll cut, you decide. Like, either one's good for me. But usually the place to actually create value, so this is a distributive model where you actually are claiming value, right? So there's this thing that exists, and you want your piece. That's what a lot of replicative businesses are, and that's what nothing wrong with it. Like, you can totally get your piece, I'm not saying that. But we focus on people and we help people and push entrepreneurship to this place where it's thinking about, how do you actually make the pie bigger? Even if you get a smaller piece, it might be bigger than this hole right here. So if you can look at value as the fact that you're trying to make the thing bigger, even if at the end of the day it's something smaller that looks smaller to you, it might actually be better for everybody and yourself included. Worst case scenario, you make it and take the same amount you're going to get before. Like, you still added something to the world that didn't exist. And so we look at the people that do those things, and whether that's like a hemp yoga mats, or like taco carts, or private airlines, CMS. So those are the things that we try and get people to look at and think about, because without the financial value, like, you can't keep a business running. And without the personal value, we ask if you should. And for us, that's what entrepreneurship is. We walk people through a program. Like, most people say, like, there's a couple big pieces to what entrepreneurship is. Accountability is one of the big things that we push on. So me being, 2 minutes late was a big deal. Like, that's not usually something that happens. And sometimes the world happens, right? Like, we can't predict everything, but accountability means, like, if you make a mess, like, clean it up. That means if you told somebody you're going to be somewhere, you're there, and if you can't be there, then you tell them you can't be there. So accountability, most people, when we run through this program, they're like, great. We use a process called a MOCR, which is a simple document, right? There's all these cool, like, tech startups that make all sorts of things, like Asana, and like all sorts of, like, project management tracking tools, and Microsoft, and there's all sorts of ways, right? But we, along with Google, uses the same approach. Omniture was a big one too, which was, it stands for mission, objectives, and key results. And it's literally a two-sided piece of paper that talks about the things that you're going to do for 90 days. So we introduce that to people and help them understand, like, how do you move the needle in 90 days? How can you do something you're trying to accomplish over 5 years in 6 months? How can you push in a way that's worth doing? So we teach people about the MOCR, and then we teach people about weekly management reports. And it's fascinating to see the curve. We see it every time, which is, I haven't seen it not happen yet. Like, I'm looking forward to the day when it breaks the cycle. But we do like a 12-week incubator program. An incubator is different than an accelerator, which is we don't take equity and we look down curve. We're trying to get problem solution fit dialed in. And most people say, like, I'm totally accountable. Like, I have integrity, not the moral type, but like, just like, I'm good to my word. Like, I don't need a piece of paper. The entrepreneurs we work with and myself is like, if you say you're going to do something, like, that should be enough. I work for the Larry H. Miller Group, and Larry Miller was this way. I work really closely with Gail. I'm glad she's coming to speak today. And integrity is all it takes usually. Risk and failure. So I'm sure somebody's going to fail here. These, like, this is part of social agreements, like being comfortable with risk and like getting comfortable with failure and what that means, because failure is usually just an opportunity to learn, and it's something that it's that people get uncomfortable with. And our incubator solely just deals with these things. Like, we don't actually try and help people scale companies. We just help them try and understand what it means to be true to their word and focus their energy on these things. And you know, the ones that get it, the entrepreneurs that we work with, like, these are the ones that are successful. So, and people say, well, what's the magic in it? It's like, that's the big trick. Like, we don't have, like, it's funny when I get asked to speak, it's like, they're like, tell us what's a good idea and tell us what you do that's different. It's like, and I appreciate that this is different than most people, but it's not novel. Like, it's really a human problem, and looking at creating things in the world that don't exist, and like having the community you need to support. And Utah Salt Lake didn't have that, so that's why we created Sustainable Startups, and that's what we do with our entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Okay, we know that next class is coming in pretty quick, but let's round the clock.